The void breathes, not with life, but with hunger. Serranos was never meant to be remembered. We were farmers, miners, traders, nothing special in the grand tapestry of the Republic. Just another agricultural world supplying food to the core. Just another footnote. That was before we felt the cold. Before we understood that some horrors move between stars not to conquer, but to consume. My name is Devours. I was a farmer on the northern plains of Serranos. I had a wife named Mira, 3 children, 200 acres of grain, a modest home built by my grandfather after the Mandalorian Wars. I had a future once. Now I am simply the witness, the one who watched it all end, the one who felt his world die around him and somehow remained, not alive, just not yet dead. The first sign came with the harvest. The stalks of grain had always stood proud and golden under twin suns, bending with the weight of their bounty. That season they grew pale and brittle. The yield was half what it should have been. The grain itself was dull, as if something had leached the vitality from within. We blamed soil depletion, atmospheric changes, the lingering effects of Republic bombing from decades past. We were wrong. It was none of those things. It was hunger approaching. The local governor sent samples to Coruscant for analysis. The Republic was still rebuilding after the Jedi Civil War. Worlds like ours were not high priority. The samples went. No answers came. We adapted as farmers always do. We planted heartier strains. We adjusted irrigation patterns. We worked harder. The land grew more barren. Then the animals began to die. First, the wild herds that roamed the plains beyond the settlement perimeters. Rangers found them collapsed. No visible wounds. No signs of disease. Just empty husks scattered across the grasslands. Then, our livestock. The herd beasts stopped eating one morning. By evening, they laid motionless in their pens, eyes open but unseeing. The veterinary droids found nothing wrong with them. No pathogens, no poisons. They simply stopped being alive. Children fell ill next. My youngest, Tarn, just 6 years old, woke crying in the night. He said he felt empty inside. That something was pulling at him. By morning, his skin had grown pale, almost translucent. The local med center filled with similar cases. Children listless, complaining of cold no thermal blankets could touch, of hunger no food could satisfy, of something missing they could not name. The planetary governor declared a state of emergency. Republic medical frigates were dispatched. They would arrive in 3 days. We had less than 2. I remember standing in my field the day before it happened. The remaining crops had lost all color, appearing gray in the sunlight. Even the soil seemed drained of vitality. I knelt and took a handful. It crumbled between my fingers, dry and lifeless. No insects moved within it. No moisture clung to my skin. The wind carried no scents. The birds had stopped singing weeks before. That evening, as the first sun set, my wife Mira pointed to the sky. A single star seemed to grow brighter, moving against the natural rotation of the heavens. We watched it expand from pinpoint to ominous shadow over the course of hours. Not a star at all. A ship, ancient, massive, damaged. Its hull was scarred with countless impacts, its silhouette irregular and wrong somehow, as if the metal itself had been twisted by more than physical force. The Ravager. Though we did not know its name then, planetary defense issued no warnings, no alerts sounded across the emergency broadcast system. We learned later that the command center had gone silent hours before the ship appeared. Every person inside found slumped at their stations, bodies intact but vacant, as if something essential had been extracted from them while the shell remained. The ship did not land. It hung in low orbit, a wound in reality against the darkening sky. No communications, no demands, no boarding parties or invasion forces, just presence, malevolent, patient, absolute. That night, no one slept on Serranos. Even those who had not seen the ship felt its shadow. Children cried without knowing why. Adults sat in darkened homes, holding each other, speaking in whispers as if afraid to draw attention. Across the plains, lights burned in farmhouses normally dark after sunset, waiting for morning, waiting for answers, waiting for the Republic ships that would never arrive in time. I remember my oldest son, Dalen, 14, and already showing the stubborn pride that marked my youth, standing at the window with my old hunting rifle, as if personal courage and civilian weapons could defend against whatever waited above. My daughter Sarah sat with Mira, both pretending to mend clothes neither could focus on. Little Tarn had finally fallen into restless sleep, his breathing shallow, his skin cool to the touch. The farm felt smaller that night. The walls seemed to press inward. The air grew stale despite open windows. The darkness outside was complete. No insects chirped, no night birds called. Even the wind died, leaving unnatural silence blanketing the plains. Then the cold came. Not the natural chill of night, but something deeper. It started at the extremities, fingertips, toes, the tip of the nose. A cold that worked inward, penetrating flesh, seeping into bone, reaching for something central, something vital. Mira gasped first. Her fingers dropped the fabric she held. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating in sudden fear or pain. She looked at me, mouth opening to speak. No words came. Instead, I watched as something invisible pulled from her, not breath, not blood, something more fundamental, the essence that separated life from mere matter. I reached for her as she fell. My hand passed through emptiness where solidity should have been. Not physical emptiness. She was still there, corporeal, substantial, but something was missing, the force that animated her, the spark. Dalen turned from the window, the rifle falling forgotten from nerveless fingers. He made a sound no child should make, not a scream, not a cry. A hollow rattle from a vessel being emptied too quickly. Sarah simply folded in on herself, collapsing without resistance. Her face showed no pain, only mild surprise, as if she had suddenly realized some obvious truth too late to matter. I remember trying to stand. My legs would not obey. The cold had reached my core, pulling at something I had never been conscious of possessing. I could feel it being drawn upward, toward the ship, toward the hunger that waited there. Through the window, I saw lights in neighboring farms wink out one by one, not powered down, extinguished. In the distance, the settlement proper went dark in sections, darkness sweeping across the grid, not like a power failure but like consumption. The air trembled, not with sound, with absence, as if reality itself were being strained through a filter, leaving only the thinnest residue behind. Tarn never woke. Whatever remained of his fading essence simply dissipated, drawn away to join the stream flowing skyward. His small body seemed to diminish somehow, though its dimensions remained unchanged. Less present, less real. I should have died with them, with my family, with my world. I do not know why I lingered. Perhaps the hunger was selective in that final phase. Perhaps some quirk of biology or spirit made me less palatable. Perhaps the void simply overlooked one insignificant consciousness among millions. I felt it pulling, drawing at me, tearing pieces away, but never completely, never enough to grant the mercy given to the others. From the window, as paralysis held me immobile, I saw it descend. Not the ship, it remained above, something else. A figure wrapped in tattered robes that moved against the wind that was not there. A mask, white as bleached bone, with narrow slits where eyes should be. No features, no expression, only hunger given form. Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, the Empty One, the wound in the Force. He did not walk so much as glide across the withered fields. Where his shadow fell, the ground blackened, molecular bonds surrendering what little vitality remained. He moved with purpose toward the settlement center, toward the concentration of fading life force. The air around him distorted, reality bending inward as if being consumed by his very presence. No sound accompanied his passage, no dramatic pronouncements, no villainous monologue. Such things were beneath or beyond him. He was elemental, a natural force perverted, hunger without satiation, consumption without purpose. I could not move, could not call out, could not even close my eyes against the horror I was forced to witness. That, I now believe, was my purpose: to see, to remember, to understand the true nature of the dark side at its most fundamental. From the settlement came no sounds of resistance, no blaster fire, no screams, only silence as the last essence of Serranos was drawn into the void. From my limited vantage, I saw the figure pause in what had been the town square. He raised arms hidden beneath ragged sleeves. The gesture was almost reverent, almost appreciative. Then he spoke, not with voice, with absence, with the negative space where sound should exist. The words bypassed ears, manifesting directly in the mind. I hunger still, 3 words. A truth so fundamental it transcended language. The core of his existence distilled to its essence. Consumption without end, hunger without satisfaction, the dark side at its most primal. He turned then, sensing perhaps the one consciousness that remained, his masked face oriented toward my distant farm. I felt his attention like a physical weight, a pressure against not just body but soul. For a moment, I thought he would come for me, would finish what the initial wave of consumption had begun. Instead, he simply acknowledged, a slight nod, an almost imperceptible tilt of that bone-white mask, recognition of the witness, of the importance of memory, of the value in leaving one voice to speak the truth of what had occurred. Then he was gone, ascending without visible means, returning to the ship that hungered as he did. The Ravager pulsed once, a ripple of darkness spreading outward. Then it vanished, jumping to hyperspace with its cargo of consumed life. I remained paralyzed until dawn. When movement finally returned to numb limbs, I found myself alone among cooling bodies. My family remained where they had fallen, physically intact but fundamentally absent. The house stood unchanged but felt hollow, as if the building itself had been diminished by what had transpired within. Outside, the devastation was total but invisible. No battles had been fought, no bombs had fallen, no fires had raged. The structures of Serranos remained, but the life was gone. Fields stretched to the horizon, crops still standing but drained of all color and vitality. The settlement buildings cast mourning shadows over empty streets. Nothing moved, nothing lived. The Republic ships arrived precisely on schedule. 3 medical frigates, a consular vessel carrying diplomatic staff, 2 security corvettes assigned to protect the humanitarian mission. They found a world of intact corpses, millions of bodies without wounds, without disease, without explanation conventional medicine could provide. The investigators came next, scientists, doctors, Republic intelligence. Even a pair of Jedi, drawn by reports too strange to ignore, they took samples. Recorded testimony. My testimony. The only voice that remained to tell what had happened. To describe the ship, the figure, the hunger that consumed a world not through violence but through absence. The Jedi were the ones who finally named him. Darth Nihilus, a wound in the Force. A being who had transcended physical form to become something other, something elemental and wrong, an absence that moved with purpose, hunger given will. One of them, an older woman with eyes that had seen too much, sat with me for hours. She did not speak much. Mostly she listened. But when I finished recounting what I had witnessed, she said something I will never forget. He consumes Force energy directly, life itself, faster and more completely than any being known to history. And he will never stop. Because for him, there is no difference between hunger and existence. They are the same. Later, others came. Military strategists wanting to understand the threat, historians documenting the aftermath of the Jedi Civil War, those seeking knowledge of Sith techniques, those simply curious about how a world dies. I told the same story so many times the words became mechanical, rehearsed, divorced from the horror they described. But at night, alone in the sterile quarters provided by the Republic relocation program, I remember it differently. I remember the feeling of being unmade, of having essential pieces pulled away, of watching everything that mattered dissolve into nothingness. I remember his words, "I hunger still," the truest expression of the dark side I have ever encountered. Not anger, not passion, not even power, just endless, insatiable consumption, taking without purpose beyond the taking itself. The Republic officially classified Serranos as a quarantine zone. They established a monitoring station in orbit to warn away curious travelers or salvagers. They listed the cause of planetary depopulation as unknown pathogenic agent in public records. The truth was deemed too disturbing, too incomprehensible for general dissemination. But those who needed to know, knew. The remaining Jedi, Republic High Command, those tracking the movements of Sith remnants, they recognized the pattern when similar reports emerged from other worlds. Qatar, Tobin, Outer Rim settlements too small to have proper names in Republic databases. Outposts found intact but devoid of life. Stations where ships docked to find every crew member lying at their posts, bodies cooling but undamaged. Mining colonies where automated equipment continued to function long after the miners had collapsed beside their workstations. Each time, survivors were rare, almost never more than one or two. Almost always left deliberately, I believe. Witnesses, voices to carry the story, to spread not just knowledge but fear. Because fear, too, has a taste, a texture in the Force, another form of sustenance for one who feeds on such things. The Jedi told me Nihilus was once a man, once a being of flesh and blood and finite hunger. The specifics of his transformation remain mysterious, intentionally obscured or simply lost as witnesses perished. Some say he was at Malachor V when the mass shadow generator was activated. That he survived something no living being should endure, and in surviving became something no longer truly alive. Others claim he was a Jedi who fell, who tapped forbidden knowledge and techniques until they consumed him, leaving only the hunger behind. The truth hardly matters now. Whatever his origins, what he became transcended such concerns. He was hunger personified. The dark side distilled to its most elemental form. I have spoken with those who study such things, who seek to understand the nature of the Force and its darker aspects. They tell me that what Nihilus practiced was not simply Sith techniques taken to extremes. It was something fundamentally different. Not the passionate, violent application of dark side energy that characterized traditional Sith. Not the lightning or telekinetic displays of power meant to dominate others. Nihilus did not dominate, he consumed. He did not control the Force. He devoured it directly from its living vessels. The technique corrupted him, even as it sustained him. Each feeding accelerated his own dissolution, requiring ever more consumption to maintain what remained of his existence. The mask was not simply affectation or armor, it was containment. Necessity. What lay beneath had long since ceased to be recognizable as the species he once belonged to, perhaps ceased to be physical in any conventional sense. The robes did not clothe a body, but rather shrouded an absence, a void with hunger and will. The Ravager itself was less a ship than an extension of its master. The metal corrupted and twisted not by weapon impacts, but by proximity to the wrongness at its core. Systems functioned without power, hyperdrive activated without fuel. Hull breaches remained open to vacuum without decompressing internal areas. It moved between stars, not through conventional technology, but through the concentrated will of the emptiness it contained. Those who encountered it and survived described the same sensations I experienced. Cold that went beyond physical. Pressure not against the body but against the mind. The feeling of being reduced, of becoming less, simply by proximity, of essential pieces being pulled away, drawn into the void. In the years since Serranos fell, I have devoted myself to tracking his movements, to understanding his nature, to warning those who might find themselves in his path. It has not been enough. World after world has fallen silent. Life after life has been drawn into that insatiable maw. The Republic struggles to comprehend the threat. How does one fight hunger itself? How does one defend against consumption on such a scale? Traditional weapons are meaningless against one who exists partially outside conventional reality. Military strategy falters against an enemy who seeks not conquest but sustenance. The Jedi understand better, but their numbers are few since the Civil War. Those with knowledge of such threats are scattered, rebuilding their order from the remnants that survived betrayal from within and without. They speak of confronting Nihilus directly, of finding some way to break his connection to the Force or to redirect his hunger. Their theories remain untested. Those who have faced him have not returned to report success or failure. I dream sometimes of Serranos as it was, fields golden under twin suns, children laughing in the settlement square, my family gathered around our table, sharing a meal harvested from our own land. Simple, precious, irretrievable. More often, I dream of the hunger, of the mask turned toward me in recognition, of the nod that spared me when millions perished, of the words that defined an existence beyond normal comprehension. I hunger still, and I wake knowing he is out there among the stars. Moving from system to system, world to world, life to life, consuming without satiation, feeding without fulfillment. A wound in existence that can never heal because its very nature prevents closure. The void breathes, not with life, but with hunger. And the galaxy holds its breath, waiting for the cold that precedes his arrival. The stillness that heralds consumption, the silence that follows in his wake. I am Devours. I was a farmer. Now I am the witness, the voice of a dead world, the memory of Serranos, and I will speak until there is no one left to hear. Until the hunger finds me at last. Until the void claims the final piece it overlooked when my world died around me. This is not simply the account of one planet's end, it is a warning. There are things in this galaxy worse than war, worse than tyranny, worse than death. There is the hunger that unmakes, the consumption that leaves not even ashes to mark what once existed. Remember Serranos. Remember what came from the stars not to rule, but to devour. Remember that sometimes the dark side wears no face, speaks no words, makes no pronouncements of power or dominion. It simply consumes until nothing remains, and still it hungers. I returned to the remains of Serranos 5 years after its fall. The Republic quarantine had been maintained but was lightly enforced. Resources were limited, threats more immediate and comprehensible demanded attention. A single, monitoring station orbited where once a vibrant world had thrived. The officer in charge recognized my name from the official records. He did not understand why anyone would wish to return to such a place, could not comprehend what drove me back to the site of such loss. He warned me that nothing had changed, that whatever had killed a world remained potentially present, potentially dangerous. He was wrong. Things had changed. The world had continued to diminish even in the absence of its consumer. Buildings that should have stood for centuries had begun to crumble, not through weathering or neglect, but through some more fundamental failure. As if the very materials had lost the will to maintain their structure. The molecular bonds weakened. Stone returned to dust. Metal oxidized at impossible rates. Synthetic materials broke down into component elements. The world was not simply dead, it was unmaking itself. My family home still stood, but only barely. The roof had partially collapsed. The walls leaned at angles that defied structural logic. Inside, I found the remains of my family where I had left them. The bodies had not decayed as biology dictated they should. Instead, they had simply faded, becoming less substantial with each passing year, translucent, ghost-like. Soon they would be gone entirely, with not even remains to mark their existence. The settlement fared no better. Buildings stood like rotted teeth in a dying mouth, crumbling inward, returning to the soil that itself seemed to be losing cohesion. The very planet was surrendering to entropy at an accelerated rate, as if Nihilus had not simply consumed its life, but had wounded reality itself, and that wound was spreading. Scientists from the monitoring station conducted regular surveys. They documented the decay without understanding its cause, took readings that defied conventional physics, collected samples that changed composition between collection and analysis. They spoke in hushed tones of quantum instability and reality degradation, of wounds in the fabric of existence that would not heal. One of them, a Duros physicist with eyes that had seen too much, shared her theories with me. She believed Nihilus did not simply consume Force energy as the Jedi described. His hunger went deeper. He fed on the underlying structure of reality itself. The Force was simply the most concentrated, most accessible form of that structure. Where he fed too deeply, that structure began to unravel. Serranos was not simply a dead world, it was a dying reality. A localized breakdown of the fundamental laws that governed existence. It would continue to decay, to diminish, to become less real until perhaps it vanished entirely from the physical universe, not destroyed, unmade. The implications were too vast, too terrible to fully comprehend. If one being could inflict such damage, could consume not just life but reality itself, what limits existed? How many worlds could fall before the fabric of the galaxy itself began to unravel? How large could such wounds grow before they merged, before they spread beyond containment? The monitoring station staff rotated frequently. Few could endure the posting for long. They reported nightmares, insomnia, the constant sensation of being watched by eyes they could not see, of being evaluated by hunger they could not comprehend. The planet itself seemed to reject their presence, as if the laws of physics that supported their existence were becoming increasingly optional within its sphere. I stayed longer than most, walked the fading remains of the world that had been my home, catalogued the accelerating decay, recorded the dissolution of a reality wounded too deeply to recover. The work gave purpose to a life that had lost its foundation, meaning to an existence that had been spared without reason or explanation. When I finally left, I carried with me soil samples, atmospheric readings, holographic records of the decay process. Data that might help others understand the true nature of the threat, the true cost of encounter with the hunger that moved between stars. The Republic officials who received my report found it difficult to accept. The military strategists and political leaders were accustomed to enemies they could comprehend, fleets that could be engaged, armies that could be defeated, governments that could be overthrown or negotiated with. Nihilus defied such conventional approaches. He was not simply a powerful Sith Lord. He was something fundamentally different. A threat, not just to lives or worlds, but to existence itself. The Jedi listened with greater understanding but no more comfort. Those versed in ancient knowledge recognized patterns from forbidden texts, references to wounds in the Force, to beings who transcended conventional mortality to become something other, something elemental and wrong. One master, older than the others, with eyes clouded by cataracts but seeing far beyond physical limitations, spoke of balance disturbed, of the Force itself responding to such wounds, working to contain the damage, to prevent the spread of unreality. She believed Nihilus could not be defeated by conventional means, only contained until the Force itself manifested a countermeasure, a healing to match the wound. I found little solace in such philosophical perspectives. They offered no immediate aid to worlds that might lie in his path, no protection for lives that might be consumed before such cosmic balance could assert itself. Instead, I focused on the practical, on identifying patterns in his movements, on predicting potential targets, on evacuating populations where possible before the hunger descended. The work was largely futile. The galaxy is vast, resources limited, the ability to relocate entire populations restricted by logistics, politics, and the simple human resistance to abandoning homes without tangible threat. Most worlds would not evacuate based on the testimony of one survivor and theories of Force consumption too esoteric for general comprehension, not until the signs manifested, the crop failures, the dying animals, the children falling ill with symptoms no medical droid could diagnose. By then, it was invariably too late. The Ravager would appear in orbit, the hunger would descend, another world would fall silent. I learned to live with failure, with the knowledge that my warnings went unheeded until confirmation came in the form of silence. Of ships arriving at trading partners to find automated systems functioning but no living beings to operate them. Of distress calls that cut off mid-transmission, not with static or signs of violence but with simple absence, as if the speaker had ceased to exist between one word and the next. The Republic established a task force eventually. Ships assigned to monitor systems believed to lie in the projected path. Early warning systems designed to detect the quantum disruptions that preceded his arrival. Evacuation protocols for worlds deemed at high risk. The measures saved some, not many, never enough. I found myself studying the survivors, the rare few who, like me, had experienced his presence and lived to speak of it. We shared a connection, a common experience too profound for words, too fundamental for those who had not endured it to truly comprehend. Some had been left deliberately, as I had. Witnesses chosen by some criteria none could determine. Others had been overlooked, whether through chance or some quality in their force presence that made them less palatable to the hunger. Still others had been at the fringes, far enough from the epicenter of consumption to lose pieces but not the whole. All were changed, diminished in ways medical science could not measure. We spoke of holes within, of pieces missing, of functions that continued but felt hollow, mechanical, divorced from the spark that had once animated them. Many did not long survive their experience. They simply faded, bodies continuing to function while something essential dissipated over months or years. Those who endured longer found purpose as I had, in warning, in testimony, in ensuring the truth was not lost among comfortable fictions of disease outbreaks or mysterious calamities. The truth was darker, stranger, more difficult to accept, but without acceptance there could be no defense, however limited, no preparation, however inadequate. The Jedi who studied such phenomena spoke of force bonds, of connections formed between beings sensitive to that energy field. They theorized that Nihilus established such bonds with his victims, using them as conduits to feed, that those who survived retained fragments of such connections, explaining the persistent sense of emptiness, of being partially unmade. I cannot confirm such theories through personal experience. I claim no sensitivity to the Force as the Jedi understand it. I was a farmer, a husband, a father. Now I am a witness, a voice, a warning carried from world to fallen world. But I recognize truth when I encounter it. The persistent cold that no environmental controls can touch. The hunger that no food satisfies. The sense of diminishment that follows me through days and haunts sleep. These are not simply psychological reactions to trauma. They are evidence of something torn away that cannot be replaced. Of wounds that will not heal because part of what was wounded no longer exists within the realm of physical reality. 10 years have passed since Serranos fell. The reports of worlds going silent have become less frequent. Intelligence suggests Nihilus has moved beyond Republic space into the unknown regions where his hunger can feed without organized resistance or documentation. Others believe he has found more concentrated sources of force energy, requiring fewer worlds to sustain his existence. Still others hope he has finally consumed himself, his hunger turning inward as the last vestiges of his physical form surrendered to entropy. I hold no such optimistic views. The hunger does not simply cease, does not satiate, does not reach natural conclusion. It continues, adapts, finds new vessels to consume, new realities to unravel. Sometimes I wake in the night feeling his attention, the weight of that masked gaze across impossible distances, the recognition between consumer and witness, the connection forged in that moment of passing judgment, of deciding which lives to take completely and which to leave diminished but intact. On such nights, I leave whatever sterile quarters the Republic has assigned me, walk outside beneath unfamiliar stars, feel the solid ground beneath feet that should not still walk, breathe air into lungs that should have surrendered their function with the rest of my world, and I listen for the silence that precedes his arrival, the stillness that heralds consumption, the void that breathes not with life, but with hunger. It will come again, to some world, some system, some concentration of life force rich enough to draw his attention, and when it does, I will add those names to the litany I carry. The witness testimony that grows with each feeding, the warning too few heed until the cold descends and words become meaningless. I am Kael Voris. I was a farmer on Serranos. Now I am the voice of worlds unmade, the memory of lives consumed, the testimony of hunger that moves between stars, and still it hungers. In the 17 years since I began documenting the path of Darth Nihilus, patterns have emerged. Not in his movements, which follow logic comprehensible only to the hunger that drives him, but in the response of those who survive his passing, in the changes that manifest in worlds touched by his presence. Reality thins where he has fed too deeply. The boundaries between physical existence and something other become permeable. Phenomena occur that defy conventional physics. Objects phase partially out of material existence. Structures occupy multiple states simultaneously. Time flows inconsistently, faster in some locations, slower in others, occasionally reversing in limited, localized events. These reality aberrations are most pronounced on worlds where the consumption was most complete. Serranos, Qatar, places where the hunger fed not just on isolated force sensitives but on entire populations, where the fabric of existence itself was wounded by his passing. The Republic classifies such phenomena under sterile bureaucratic terminology: quantum instabilities, localized reality distortions, temporal anomalies. Terms that describe the symptoms without acknowledging the cause, that allow reports to be filed, warnings to be issued, quarantines to be established without confronting the fundamental horror underlying it all. The Jedi understand better but speak of it only among themselves. They recognize wounds in the Force when they encounter them, feel the wrongness in places where the natural flow of energy has been disrupted or destroyed. Their most sensitive members cannot approach such locations without experiencing physical distress, nausea, disorientation, in extreme cases, seizures or temporary loss of their own connection to the Force. I feel it differently, not through mystical connection but through the bond formed when he spared me, when he marked me as witness rather than sustenance. The emptiness recognizes emptiness. The wound acknowledges wound. I can walk where others cannot, see what others miss, feel the thinning of reality that follows in his wake. This ability has proven valuable to the Republic task force assigned to track and contain the threat he represents. They bring me to worlds where his passing is suspected but not confirmed. Where conventional evidence is ambiguous or contradictory, I can tell them with certainty whether the hunger has fed there, can trace the epicenter of consumption, can map the spread of unreality that follows. The work takes its toll. Each exposure reinforces the connection, strengthens the bond between witness and hunger. The cold grows deeper. The emptiness expands. Pieces of me that survived the initial encounter dim with each subsequent proximity to places where he has fed. Medical scans show nothing physically wrong, no disease, no degradation of organs or systems. My body continues to function with mechanical precision, but something less tangible diminishes. The spark that separates living being from animated matter fades incrementally with each investigation. The Jedi who work with the task force notice. They watch me with concern veiled behind professional detachment. They measure the changes in ways their instruments cannot detect, but their senses perceive clearly. They debate whether to continue using my abilities, weighing the tactical value against the evident cost. I do not participate in such discussions. My course was set the moment he turned that masked face toward my home and acknowledged my existence. I am the witness, the voice, the memory. I will continue until the hunger finds me again, until the void claims what it overlooked when Serranos died around me. 3 days ago, a Republic intelligence operative approached me with new information, a pattern detected not through conventional monitoring but through absence, through silence where communication should exist, through gaps in the expected flow of commerce, information, and movement. A sector in the outer rim has gone quiet, not with the sudden totality that marks his usual feeding, but gradually, systemically, communication outposts falling silent one by one, trading vessels failing to arrive at scheduled destinations, automated distress signals activating briefly before terminating without explanation. The pattern is different, methodical where his hunger has always been immediate, selective where his consumption has typically been absolute. It suggests adaptation, evolution, the hunger finding new methods to feed, new approaches to sustenance. The intelligence officer spoke of strategic withdrawal, of redirecting resources to establish a containment perimeter around the affected sector, of sacrificing what has already been lost to protect what remains. Practical, logical. The only viable response to a threat that cannot be engaged directly with available resources. The Jedi representative disagreed, spoke of obligation to those who might still be saved, of the danger in allowing the hunger to feed unopposed, to grow stronger, to evolve without resistance. Idealistic, principled, equally valid in its assessment of long-term consequences. They turned to me, the witness, the survivor, the one who has walked the path of his passing longer than any other still living. They asked what I believed should be done, what response the pattern suggested was appropriate. I told them the truth as I understand it. The hunger does not think as we do, does not plan, does not strategize in terms comprehensible to conventional intelligence. It exists, it consumes, it adapts when necessary to continue consumption. If the pattern has changed, it is not through conscious decision, but through the fundamental drive to feed more efficiently, to sustain an existence that should have ended long ago, to perpetuate a wound in reality that the universe itself works to close. I told them I would go, would enter the silent sector, would trace the path of consumption to its source, would confirm whether the hunger had found new methods of feeding or some other force was at work, merely mimicking his patterns to conceal its own nature. They argued, of course. The intelligence officer cited risk factors, resource limitations, the low probability of actionable intelligence justifying the commitment. The Jedi spoke of duty and necessary sacrifice, of the unique value my experience provided, of the lives that might be saved through early warning. Neither truly understood. This was not about tactical advantage or moral obligation. This was about completion, about the witness meeting the hunger once more, about closing a circle opened 17 years ago on a dying farm on a world few now remember existed. I departed 3 standard days later aboard a small scout vessel, officially listed as an intelligence-gathering mission, minimal crew, limited duration. Expected to approach the perimeter of the affected zone, collect long-range sensor data, and withdraw before contact with whatever had silenced a sector. The crew knew better. The pilot, a veteran of the Mandalorian Wars with eyes that had seen too many comrades fall, never questioned our true destination. The security officer, younger but with the hardened efficiency of Republic Special Forces, checked weapons that would prove useless should we encounter what I suspected waited ahead. The single Jedi observer, a woman of middle years with prematurely silver hair and a lightsaber that rarely left her hand, watched me with knowing eyes but offered no resistance to our course. We crossed the perimeter 5 days into the mission. The transition was subtle but unmistakable. Sensors continued to function but readings became inconsistent. Communications remained open, but signals degraded in ways engineering could not explain. The ship itself seemed to grow less substantial, vibrations passing through hull plates that should have dampened them, systems operating at efficiencies that violated their design parameters. Reality thinning, the familiar precursor, the warning I had documented on world after world. The crew felt it in different ways. The pilot reported navigational anomalies, stars shifting position slightly when observed directly rather than through instruments. The security officer found weapons discharging without activation, power cells draining without use, targeting systems acquiring phantom readings. The Jedi felt it most acutely. Her connection to the Force made her sensitive to the wrongness that permeated the sector. She spoke, a pressure against her mind. of cold that environmental systems could not dispel, of hunger that watched from just beyond perception. I felt recognition, the bond awakening after years of dormancy, the witness acknowledging the hunger acknowledging the witness, not with consciousness as living beings understand it, with something more fundamental, more elemental. The connection between opposing forces that define each other through contrast. We followed the gradient of wrongness, moved from systems where reality had thinned slightly toward those where it had grown gossamer, planets where structures phased partially out of existence, orbital stations where corridors looped back on themselves in ways that violated spatial geometry, asteroid fields where rocks occupied multiple positions simultaneously, appearing solid from one angle and transparent from another. The trail led to a system unmarked on standard charts, a red giant in its final evolutionary stages, 3 planets too close to the dying star to support conventional life, a scattered debris field that might once have been additional worlds before stellar expansion consumed them, and in high orbit around the innermost planet, a ship, ancient, massive, damaged, the Ravager, unchanged from when it appeared above Serranos nearly 2 decades earlier. The wound in space that carried hunger between stars. We approached with minimal power, more from instinct than tactical consideration, as if the reduction of energy signatures could conceal us from something that fed on more fundamental levels than electromagnetic radiation or neutrino emissions. The Jedi collapsed before we reached sensor range, fell to the deck plating without warning or sound. Her body continued to function, heart beating, lungs drawing breath. But consciousness fled, pulled away by forces our medical systems could neither detect nor counteract. The security officer moved to abort the approach, to retreat while withdrawal remained possible. The pilot looked to me for direction, for the experience that had guided the mission to this point, for the witness to provide testimony before evidence consumed those sent to collect it. I ordered continuation, knew it for the irrational command it was. Recognized the compulsion driving it came not from tactical necessity, but from the pull of completion, from the need to close the circle, to fulfill the purpose for which I had been spared when Serranos died around me. We closed to visual range. The Ravager hung against the backdrop of the red giant, silhouetted by stellar fire that should have incinerated conventional materials, but seemed unable to touch the ancient hull. It remained as I remembered, scarred by countless impacts, irregular in silhouette, as if the metal itself had been twisted by more than physical force, less a vessel than a wound given physical form. But something had changed. The stillness that had surrounded it above Serranos was gone. In its place, movement, constant, flowing, streams of energy, visible even to unaided eyes, transferred between ship and planet below. Not the sudden, absolute consumption I had witnessed before, something more measured, more sustainable. The hunger had adapted, had found a new method of feeding. Sensor readings confirmed what visual observation suggested. The planet below was alive, not with conventional biological organisms, but with energy patterns our systems classified as coherent plasma discharges. The stellar radiation from the red giant interacted with planetary materials to generate fields that registered as semi-sentient in Jedi monitoring equipment. Not fully conscious as carbon-based life forms understand the concept, but aware, reactive, alive by definitions broader than those applied to organisms that evolved in more hospitable environments. The Ravager was not consuming this energy completely as it had the life force of Serranos and other worlds. It was feeding in measured amounts, taking enough to sustain itself but leaving the generation process intact, farming rather than hunting, cultivating a renewable resource rather than exhausting a finite one. The hunger had evolved, had found sustainability, where before it had known only consumption without consideration for future feeding. Had developed, if not intelligence in conventional terms, then adaptation that served the same practical purpose. The security officer recognized the strategic implications immediately. A Darth Nihilus who could sustain himself indefinitely was a threat without foreseeable conclusion. One who could maintain his existence without leaving the trail of silence and death that had made his movements trackable. one who might emerge at any time, anywhere, at full strength, rather than driven by the desperation of starvation. The Republic needed this intelligence, needed to adjust containment strategies and defensive preparations based on this fundamental change in the nature of the threat. We had to withdraw, had to deliver our findings while withdrawal remained possible. I knew she was correct, acknowledged the logical necessity of the conclusion, recognized the value of the intelligence we had gathered and the importance of ensuring it reached those positioned to act upon it. Yet I made no move to order retreat, felt no urgency to escape while escape remained possible. The witness had found the hunger once more. The circle approached closure. Purpose neared fulfillment. The security officer recognized the hesitation, the unnatural calm, the acceptance of what should have prompted survival instinct and tactical withdrawal. She moved to relieve me of command, to enact emergency protocols that would override the compulsion that held me motionless before the ancient ship and what it contained. She never completed the motion. Her hand had barely touched the sidearm at her hip when she stiffened. Not with paralysis as I had experienced on Serranos, with shock, recognition, understanding beyond what sensor readings and visual observation could provide. He was aboard our vessel, not physically, not in any conventional sense that security systems could have detected or defensive measures prevented. His presence manifested directly, bypassing normal space to appear within our command center without transition or warning. The bone-white mask, the tattered robes that moved against the ambient circulation currents, the absence that walked with purpose, hunger given form, Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, the Empty One, the wound in the Force. The security officer drew her weapon with commendable speed, fired without hesitation. The energy discharge passed through the apparition without resistance or effect, dissipated against bulkheads designed to absorb and redirect such attacks. She fired again with identical results before the weapon simply disintegrated in her grip, molecular bonds surrendering to proximity with the hunger. The pilot remained frozen at her station, not with fear, though that was present beneath the surface, with the same paralysis I had experienced when Serranos died around me, the same helplessness in the face of something that operated on levels beyond conventional resistance. Nihilus did not acknowledge them. His masked face turned toward me with the same recognition I had felt through the bond established nearly 2 decades earlier. The witness and the hunger, completing the circle begun when he spared one voice among millions consumed. He spoke as he had before, not with voice, with absence, with the negative space where sound should exist. Words that bypassed ears to manifest directly in the mind. The witness returns. 3 words, different from those spoken on Serranos, yet carrying the same fundamental truth. The acknowledgement of purpose, of role in a drama beyond conventional comprehension. I found myself able to respond, not with voice. My lips remained paralyzed, my vocal cords unresponsive, but with thought directed through the bond between us. With consciousness shaped into communication and transmitted across the gulf that separated witness from hunger. To see, to remember, to understand. The words came without conscious formulation, the purpose distilled to its essence, the role assigned and accepted when Serranos died around me. The mask inclined slightly, the same nod given years before, recognition, acknowledgement, acceptance of the truth underlying our connection. Then he extended a hand shrouded in tattered robes, not toward me, toward the unconscious Jedi still collapsed on the deck plating. Fingers hidden from sight made a slight grasping motion. Her body convulsed once, a reflexive spasm quickly suppressed, then stilled completely as something essential was drawn away, not life itself. She continued to breathe, heart continued to beat, something more fundamental. The connection to the Force that defined her existence as a Jedi. I felt it pass between them. The energy transferred not in the measured, sustainable flow established with the plasma entities below, but with the complete, absolute consumption I had witnessed on Serranos. Her connection severed not temporarily but permanently, her sensitivity to the Force not dampened but excised, the hunger fed as it always had, completely, finally, without consideration for the vessel that had contained what it consumed. Then the masked face turned toward me once more. The empty eye slits regarded the witness with what might have been curiosity had such human emotions remained within the void that had once been a living being. "You carry what was taken." The words manifested with the same absence of sound, the same direct imposition on consciousness. But their meaning was less clear. Confusion must have transmitted through the bond between us, prompting clarification. Pieces, fragments, echoes of consumed worlds. The hunger recognizes its own. Understanding came with the explanation. The emptiness I had carried since Serrano's. The cold no environmental controls could touch. The hunger no food could satisfy. These were not simply psychological reactions to trauma or metaphorical descriptions of loss. They were literal fragments of what had been taken. Echoes of consumed force energy that had somehow attached to the witness rather than transferring completely to the consumer. The hunger recognized what belonged to it, identified fragments of itself carried within the witness, saw completion, available beyond simple acknowledgement of the role assigned and accepted. The bone-white mask tilted slightly. The tattered robes shifted without air currents to move them. The hand that had consumed the Jedi's connection to the Force extended toward me, not grasping as it had with her, open, offering rather than taking, return what was borrowed, complete what was begun, join what was separated. The choice was offered, not demanded. The hunger that consumed without consideration for the consumed presented option to the witness, completion, integration. The final fulfillment of purpose assigned and accepted when Serrano's died around me. I felt the pull of it, the rightness, the closure it represented, the end to cold that could not be warmed, to hunger that could not be satisfied, to emptiness that could not be filled. The fragments carried for decades, rejoining the whole from which they had been separated. But behind that pull, a deeper understanding emerged. The fragments were not simply echoes of consumed worlds. They were pieces of those worlds preserved. Memories carried not just by the witness but by the energy itself, the final remnants of Serrano's and all that had existed upon it, my family, my home, my world. Preserved not just in testimony but in the fundamental structure of the force energy that had been incompletely consumed. To surrender those fragments would be to surrender the final traces of what had been, to allow the hunger to consume completely what it had overlooked in its initial feeding, to erase the last evidence that Serrano's had ever existed beyond the witness testimony I had carried from world to fallen world. I did not extend my hand to meet his, did not accept the completion offered, did not surrender what had been carried from the moment of passing judgment, of deciding which lives to take completely and which to leave diminished but intact. The witness maintains separation, preserves fragmentation, chooses incompletion. The words held no judgment, no anger, no emotional response to rejection that would have been recognizable to living beings. Simply acknowledgement of choice made, of completion deferred, of purpose maintained rather than fulfilled. The bone-white mask inclined once more. The slight nod that had marked me as witness rather than sustenance nearly 2 decades earlier. Recognition of role continued rather than concluded. Then he was gone, not withdrawn or departed in any conventional sense, simply absent where presence had been. The void closed, the hunger returned to its feeding elsewhere. The security officer found mobility returning to paralyzed limbs. The pilot regained control of frozen muscles. Both turned toward me with questions no language could properly frame, with need for explanation no testimony could completely provide. I gave them what I could, described the choice offered and rejected, the completion deferred, the purpose maintained. They understood incompletely, as those who have not directly experienced the hunger must. Accepted the limitations of conventional language to convey what had transpired. Acknowledged the necessity of withdrawal while withdrawal remained possible. We retreated from the system with our intelligence, the confirmation of adaptation, of evolution in the feeding patterns of the hunger that moved between stars. of sustainability where once only consumption without consideration for future feeding had existed. The Republic Task Force received our report with the gravity it deserved. Adjusted containment strategies and defensive preparations based on the fundamental change in the nature of the threat. Established new monitoring parameters designed to detect the more subtle energy transfers that might indicate his presence where once only silence and absence had served as markers. The Jedi never regained consciousness. Her body continued to function with mechanical precision, heart beating, lungs drawing breath, but the spark that had animated the vessel was gone, consumed completely, leaving only empty shell behind. The hunger had fed as it always had, taking everything the vessel contained of what it required for sustenance. I continue my work with the task force. The witness testimony now enhanced by direct confirmation of adaptation, of evolution in the threat, of changes in the hunger that moved between stars, but I carry something more. The understanding that what was taken was not completely lost, that fragments preserved within the witness maintain separation from the whole, that echoes of consumed worlds continue to exist apart from the hunger that devoured them. I am Kale Voris. I was a farmer on Serranos. Now I am the voice of worlds unmade, the memory of lives consumed, the testimony of hunger that moves between stars, and within me, preserved against the void, the last fragments of a world that was, the final echoes of Serranos, of my family, my home. My life before witnessing became purpose and testimony became existence. The void breathes, not with life, but with hunger. And still, against all reason, against completion itself, fragments of what was taken remain separate, preserved, remembered not just in words spoken but in essence carried. The witness maintains vigil. The circle remains open. The testimony continues while fragments remain preserved against the hunger that would consume them, and still it hungers.